When Myles Garrett gave up his own money, it wasn't just sacrifice, it was a warning to the entire NFL. Because what they're building around Shedeur Sanders, nobody is ready for what's coming next.
All right, so it looks like Myles Garrett just did a awesome deed and made a good move to help Shedeur Sanders, new head coach Todd Monken and the Cleveland Browns potentially make more moves to adding more talent to help this team win.
Myles Garrett just did something that nobody in the NFL saw coming, and it changes everything for Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns. The reigning NFL Defensive Player of the Year voluntarily restructured his own contract to free up cap space for this organization, not because he was forced to, not because the team demanded it, because he chose to. He looked at what Cleveland is building around Shedeur Sanders, looked at what Todd Monken is bringing to this offense, and decided to sacrifice his own financial structure to make sure this team can go out and add the talent they need to actually compete. That is not just a contract move. That is a statement. That is a franchise defender putting his money where his mouth is and telling the entire league, we are building something real in Cleveland.
Let's get right into this, courtesy of ESPN. Myles Garrett, modified language and contract. The Cleveland Browns and reigning NFL Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett, have agreed to modified language on his contract that became official on Tuesday, per league sources. Garrett's contract previously called for his option bonuses in 2026, 2027, and 2028 to be exercised by the 15th day of the league year. In the amended terms, the date has been pushed back to 7 days before the regular season each year.
All right, let's get into the details of this, because the specifics of what Myles Garrett just agreed to are even more impressive when you actually understand what he gave up and what it means for this roster going forward. Because this is not a small tweak. This is not some routine off-season paperwork that teams file every year. This is a deliberate, calculated move by one of the best defensive players on the planet to restructure his own money in a way that directly benefits the Cleveland Browns' ability to build around their young quarterback. Here is what actually happened. According to ESPN, Garrett and the Browns agreed to modified language on his existing contract. Previously, his option bonuses for 2026, 2027, and 2028 had to be exercised by the 15th day of the league year. Under the new terms, that deadline has been pushed all the way back to 7 days before the regular season each year. That is a massive shift. That means Cleveland now has significantly more flexibility in how and when they commit that money, which opens up cap space earlier in the offseason, right when free agency is happening, right when the Browns need to be making moves to add talent around Shadur. And on top of that, $8 million of Garrett's base salary in 2029 and 2030 was moved into roster bonuses earlier in each league year. The modifications create real, meaningful cap flexibility for this organization right now, in the windows that matter most. And yes, Garrett benefits too from the modified payment structure. This is not purely a sacrifice where he walks away with nothing. He gets something out of the adjusted terms. But here is the point that cannot be missed. Myles Garrett did not have to do this. He is the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. He is the best player on this football team. He had leverage, he had options, and he chose to work with the Browns to restructure his deal in a way that gives this organization more room to operate. That tells you everything about where his head is at and what he thinks about the direction this team is heading. Now think about what this means specifically for Shedeur Sanders, because that is the context that makes this story hit different. Hold on, because this is where it gets really interesting. The biggest criticism of Cleveland's roster heading into 2026 has been the offensive side of the ball. Wide receivers, offensive line depth, playmakers around the quarterback. The people who have been skeptical about Shedeur's chances this season have pointed to the supporting cast as the reason why, even if he wins the starting job, he might not be able to do enough with what he has around him. And that is a fair conversation to have, but what Myles Garrett just did is directly address that concern. He freed up cap space. He gave Andrew Berry more ammunition to go out and bolster that offense. He put the front office in a better position to give Shedeur Sanders the weapons he needs to succeed. And the guys at 92.3 The Fan broke it down perfectly. They said this is what Myles Garrett does. This is who he is. You ask him to make a game-changing play on defense, and he delivers. You ask him to restructure his contract to help the team, and he delivers. He is not a player who puts himself above the organization. He is a player who understands that individual greatness means nothing without team success, and he is willing to act on that understanding in a way that most star players simply are not.
Hey, this is what they do.
This is what they do. Yeah,
Yeah,
this
if
is like,
you
this
ask
is
him
part
to
of that.
draft, depending on the year, you ask him to make a trade or find a quarterback, you ask him to manipulate the salary cap, and oh boy, they'll do it.
I think that's Andrew Berry's biggest strength.
Is that why he's still here?
It might be part of it. Yeah, like that's there's a real belief that is part of what Andrew Berry brings the most to the table.
Let's talk about Andrew Berry for a second, because the cap manipulation piece of this story is something that does not get enough credit in the national conversation about Cleveland. One of the hosts on 92.3 said it straight. Andrew Berry's biggest strength might be his understanding of the salary cap. What he has been able to do within the constraints of that cap, the way he engineers these kinds of restructures and moves, operates at a level that very few front office executives in the league can match. And the fact that Myles Garrett, a player who has every right to protect his own financial interests above all else, is willing to sit down with Berry and work out a deal like this, that speaks to a level of organizational trust that you cannot manufacture. That trust is earned over time through transparency, through respect, and through a shared belief that the people running this franchise are actually trying to win. And the ownership piece matters here too. The hosts made a really sharp point about Jimmy Haslam. You can have all the feelings you want about Cleveland's ownership history and the drama that has come with it over the years, but one thing that nobody can take away from Haslam is that he spends. He is not a small market owner who pinches pennies and watches his franchise slide into irrelevance because he does not want to open the checkbook. When the Browns need to spend, they spend. And now that Berry has freed up additional cap flexibility through the Garrett restructure, the question becomes, what does he do with it? What pieces does he go out and add to put Shedeur Sanders in the best possible position heading into 2026? Because that is the real stakes of this Myles Garrett story. This is not just about one contract modification. This is about a franchise signaling that they are serious about building a winner right now. When your best defensive player voluntarily restructures his deal to create cap space for the offense, that is a culture statement. That is the kind of thing that changes how players around the league view a franchise. That is the kind of thing that makes free agents pick up the phone when Cleveland calls instead of sending it to voicemail. And here is what I want you to really sit with for a minute, because we talk a lot about what Shedeur Sanders needs to do to prove himself. We talk about the quarterback competition, the first-team reps, the supporting cast, the scheme. All of that is real, and all of that matters. But sometimes the most important things that happen for a young quarterback are not the things he does himself. Sometimes it is the culture being built around him. Sometimes it is the veteran leader on the other side of the ball deciding to take less to give the offense more. Sometimes it is the front office engineering a cap move that opens doors the team did not have open before. Myles Garrett just did that for Shedeur Sanders, and Shadur did not even have to ask. Now let's zoom out and talk about the draft, because that is the other major piece of this offseason puzzle, and it connects directly to what Berry can do now with additional cap flexibility. The hosts at 92.3 made it very clear. This draft is genuinely tricky for Andrew Berry in a way that last year's draft was not. Last year, the landscape set up almost perfectly. There were good football players everywhere. Barry moved from 2 to 5, grabbed extra draft capital, and then went out and found impact players at multiple positions regardless of scheme fit or premium positional value. It was a best player available approach executed at an extremely high level, and it worked. This year is different. The hosts were honest about it. The blue chip prospects are debatable. The top tackles might actually be better suited at other positions. The top wide receiver comes with significant injury history. The next best receiver might profile as a number 2 rather than a true number 1. The draft does not have the same depth of obvious impact players at the spots Cleveland needs most, and that means Barry cannot just run the same script he ran last year and expect the same results. But here is where the Garrett restructure becomes even more valuable in this context. If the draft does not deliver a clear offensive playmaker at pick 6, if Barry decides the value is not there to stay and takes a trade back to accumulate more picks, he now has cap space to potentially address offensive needs through a free agency signing or a trade that he did not have before. The flexibility Garrett just created gives Barry options that he would not otherwise have. Options to add a wide receiver, options to strengthen the offensive line, options to put real weapons in Shedeur Sanders' hands before Week 1 of the 2026 season. And that is what makes this Myles Garrett move so significant beyond just the numbers. It is not just about the dollars, it's about what those dollars unlock. It's about what becomes possible for this offense, for this quarterback, because the best defender on the team decided to be a team player in the most literal financial sense of that phrase. Think about the message this sends inside that locker room too. When Shedeur Sanders walks into that building every day this offseason, he now knows that the best player on his team went out of his way to create more resources for the offense. He knows that Myles Garrett looked at this situation, looked at what they're building together in Cleveland, and decided it was worth restructuring his own deal to give the team a better shot. That is the kind of leadership that changes the energy of a franchise. That is the kind of thing that makes a young quarterback believe, not just think, but genuinely believe that the people around him are invested in his success. And if you've watched Shedeur Sanders for any length of time, you know exactly what happens when he feels that kind of support. You know what he did at Colorado when people believed in him. You know what he did in Cleveland when he climbed from 4th string to starting 7 straight games. This man does not wilt under pressure. He does not shrink when the moment gets big. He rises every single time. So now you have a defense anchored by the reigning Defensive Player of the Year who just restructured his contract to help the offense. You have Andrew Barry, widely considered one of the best cap managers in the league, now with additional flexibility to add playmakers. You have Todd Monken running an offense that multiple insiders have identified as the perfect scheme for a young quarterback to grow within. And you have Shedeur Sanders standing in the middle of it all, heading into what could be the most important season of his career with more support around him than he has ever had at the professional level. The only question left is, does this organization actually go out and use that cap space to build something worthy of what Myles Garrett just sacrificed? Because the move has been made, the flexibility is there, and Shedeur Sanders is ready. Is Myles Garrett's contract sacrifice the moment that finally turns Cleveland into a legitimate contender, or does the front office waste this window the same way they have wasted so many others? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments right now, because this is the conversation that needs to be happening in the Browns fan base today. If you want the real story before anybody else is breaking it down, you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button and stay locked in. We are not going anywhere.